everybody. Thank you so much for all of you for coming. I know you're all busy, and thank you for taking the time to listen. Please write down any questions. I love questions, no matter how basic. So, two quotes I want to start with. First, the landscape painter, British landscape painter, early 19th century, who said, "I should paint my own places best." And also Sally Mann, the photographer, who, and this is just from her recent book called Artwork, which is written for young artists, which I really loved. It seems to me most artists work out of place. And I remember when I was a young artist, I heard this expression, sense of place. And I just loved that. It seemed like that's what I wanted to make paintings about. Unfortunately, unlike Sally Mann and Constable, I didn't really have a piece of land, a territory that I felt very close to. And so I think that's why over the years, my house has become my place. But at any rate, my parents moved me away from New York when I was starting high school to the Providence, Rhode Island area. This is where I met Daphne, where she went to school. And because of sort of boredom and isolation, I started to draw, probably like a lot of you. Drawing was a way to combat boredom and to engage with the world, the visual world. I just felt more connected to my surroundings if I was drawing things, and times just seemed to speed by. So these are two little paintings of the Rhode Island State House. And I painted them while I was in college at Brown, which is right next door to RISD. I went to the university thinking I could not go to an art school. I kind of wish I had now gone to an art school. But, it's a lot. I think for, the journey when you go to a college rather than an art school, it's the slow scenic route. You just take your time and you kind of find out who you are, and there's no rush. So at any rate, I think I was the first and probably the last painter from Brown to paint plein air. They were much more conceptual. And so when I was at Brown, we were all under the spell of an art critic named Clement Greenberg. I don't know if many of you read him anymore, but he really was this very influential guy who wrote about abstract painting as being the only way a person could paint in the late 20th century. And he really divided the art world. This was a time when figurative painters and abstract painters didn't really talk to each other. And so I loved the way abstract painting was talked about and the way you really had to behold these paintings over time. I mean, they're very slow, right? And I love Clifford Still. I like these dark paintings. Clifford Still, who spent a lot of time in Washington State, these paintings are touched so slowly. His mark with the palette knife moves across the surface. I just loved these paintings. I had no idea how to be a perceptual painter and kind of get this feeling of the object of the painting into my paintings. I'm going to just show you some painters who were very important to me. One is Vuillard, and he painted with this casing. It's called distemper. It was a matte paint that theater set designers used because it didn't reflect light, and it's very matte. And I got to see some of these big murals when I was still a teenager, and I just love them. They're both very abstract, but they're of domestic scenes. And I loved Roman wall painting. I didn't get to see much till I was, a little bit older, actually on my honeymoon. But the thing that's so amazing about wall painting, and you can see a lot of it if you go to Naples, is you're looking at a wall and you know that it's made out of cement, and yet it also dissolves into air. And I think this feeling of painting having surface but also illusion is fundamental, well, for me, to what makes painting special, because screens don't have it. Photography, though very beautiful and important to me, doesn't have that sort of feeling of the surface. But in painting, you can both look at the kind of the object and what it feels like, and as well as sort of enter into this world of air. So as I started to paint more interiors, of course, I bumped up against the great Dutch painters. The Vermeer on the left was the first one I knew. It was the one that was stolen from the museum in Boston, The Gardener. It's such a beautiful painting, The Concert, and they've never found it. They don't know where it is. I hope someday they find it again. Such a beautiful painting. But I really liked his contemporary De Hoek, because the paintings are a little messier. They're not quite as ordered. And this is one of my favorite paintings. On the right, there's a woman. I thought the first time I saw the painting that she was like knitting or something. It turns out, if you look really carefully, she's taking the lice out of a child's hair. And then on the left, there's this light that pulls you out past the dog, out the window. And so the painting is really divided. Do you look at the woman or do you look at the light? I kind of love that, those two things going on. So these are two painters very important to me, Matisse and Bonnard. And there was a curator at the Museum of Modern Art who curated a Bonnard show. His name was John Elderfield, and he wrote this catalog and this essay that just changed my life because he put into words something that seemed so important to me. He said, Matisse makes images that are really memorable. He said, that's why college students always want Matisse posters on their walls. But Bonnard paints experiences. Like you need time to kind of figure out what's in the painting. There's a figure that's off to the side and you don't even see them. They're hiding in the shadows. And he talked about the difference between foveal and peripheral vision, where it's like what's right in front of you and what's at the edges. And he goes, they're harder to look at. These are about experience. And that just rang true. It's like, it's an experience it's a painting that's about the experience that unfolds over time. So I thought, in a way, Bonnard is more cinematographic because it's like what happens when, a camera kind of enters a room and then sort of pans around and sees things in the corners. And I wanted to make paintings like that. So when I was first out of school, so we didn't have the internet, back then in the early 80s, you couldn't really see that much art unless there was in art magazines. There were some great paintings that were being made in the 70s that I just missed, like Hockney's double portraits. I wish I'd seen those. But at any rate, there were two great shows that were really important to me. One was Fairfield Porter in Boston, and one was a Milton Avery show at the Whitney. And Fairfield Porter is a painterly realist, and I wasn't sure what to make of him, if he was okay. I thought, I don't know, he was sort of, I just thought maybe that kind of realism wasn't that interesting. I was much more interested in Avery, who was more abstract and who was coming out of that school of French painting, Matisse. And so the funny thing is I look at this now and I thought they're not that different. And actually, I think I've kind of brought them together. But back then it was like this decision, do I go left or do I go right? I just wasn't sure what to do. So I had a kind of crisis. At any rate, one of I call it the realist crisis, which is like, I think things should be realistic, but I really love the kind of language of painting that is a metaphor for the reality. So these are two quotes that maybe you all know, and I didn't really understand them until I was much older. I remember thinking like, wow, what are they talking about? One is, we all know that art is not truth. Art is a lie that makes us realize the truth. And that is given us to understand. So like, art is a lie? Like, what does that even mean? And then George O'Keeffe said, nothing is less real than realism. Details are confusing. It is only by selection, by elimination, by emphasis that we get to the real meaning of things. But these quotes I've kind of come to understand, and they sort of give me a hope to kind of to find my own language for reality. So I kind of had a crisis, and I made still lives. I started to paint the figure in these interiors through grad school in the early 80s, and then I just hated my paintings, and they started to get darker and darker, and until I was making these black paintings in the late 80s. And these are them on the wall. And I'll tell you, these were really important paintings to me. For one reason is they're figurative. They're actually about my mother and father in their house. My mother was very sick. So some people saw them as paintings about mourning, but whatever. What I loved is that you didn't see what was in the painting right away. The first thing you saw was a black rectangle. If you didn't want to look, fine, you could walk away. The only way you could get anything out of these paintings was letting your eyes acclimate. So they were experiential, they were slow, and I kind of liked that. I don't know, that it's sort of, my brother said they were passive aggressive. They were a little bit, but I also love the way they taught me how to paint close value color. Now, I never learned at Brown or in grad school how to really mix color. And I'm sure most of you have, if you've studied with Daphne and Jen. But these paintings taught me how to mix really carefully and clean my brushes and mix many different tones was very close tone, close value, but many different hues within this value range of blacks. And it just taught me discipline, which is so important. And I just think that the close value color is so important to painting. It is the way that we get air, it's the way we get space, and you can introduce contrast into a close value world, but I think it's always best to start with a close value. So the problem with these paintings is that they were very shiny. If you've ever made a black painting, you know that liquin or an alkyd medium is great for keeping the blacks alive and so that they don't sink, and get kind of dull. But these paintings were like black mirrors, and they couldn't be photographed, and they were almost impossible to see. So I got kind of tired of this black world. So I started to mix my paint with marble dust and wax and make a cement kind of paint that was almost like those Roman wall paintings. So, and kind of like Clifford Still, I was kind of palette knifing it across the canvas so that you get this crunchy surface that then would have the image into it. And so I made a lot of these paintings that were sometimes just the corner of a room or still life. But then I thought, into this kind of close value surface, what if I put really the things of my life that were very specific? So by this point, we have moved to, I never thought I would spend my life here, but because of a bunch of coincidences, stayed in this Providence area. And my husband and I built these large studios in a tiny house on this land next to my parents' house. So we have two kids, really kind of in isolation. And I start to paint the world of the kids, like baby carriages and toys, and these are kiddie pools. And to put them into this really crusty world was interesting to me. It just gave a kind of tension. So my life gets complicated. I've got babies. I teach at Brandeis University. So lucky to have this job, which gives me also a community of artists that I saw at work. We had a great painting program, and my husband's a painter, Dennis Condon, who was Daphne's mentor, and he taught at RISD. And so very busy. I had very little time to paint. So I would go into the studio and I'd have like 2 hours. So I'd paint like a flower, and then I'd leave, and then I'd paint, this is a Masaccio postcard. And when I finally filled in this painting of all these little studies, I realized, like, actually, I could paint. This sort of feels like my world. Maybe I could paint a whole, interior in this way out of parts. So I stretched up a big canvas on the wall, and I started with that vase to the right of roses. It's in a two-tone color vase. And I put it in like a little bubble. So it's the figure ground relationship. It's a little vase in its surroundings. And I paint that. And then when I have studio time, I could never paint around the family. So I'd go in the studio, babysitters, daycare, whatever, then leave. And then the next day I came in and put her arm in the top of the chair. And then the next day I came in, put the other arm, and then a can. And then I'm realizing, like, where am I? Okay, I'm I'm starting to realize where I might be. I'm at the table in my house. So I'm painting, our studio is next to our house, but all of these objects are around. I can bring them into the studio, and I can always run into the house and, and look hard. So I've been making those black paintings. Those were painted from memory. So of my parents' house, which I knew so well. So I've gotten kind of used to the idea of painting from memory, which doesn't feel that different once you get used to it, to painting from direct perception. I think it's a lot easier because light doesn't change and you can just really stay focused on that image that's in your brain, like a dream. It's like in there, very clear. So I just sort of built this painting and out to the edges, and the bottom is maybe it's more going on than the top, but we had that lamp and then my daughter and her doll on the floor, so that all kind of got filled in. Then certain things kind of got moved around. It's not like I just put things in and never took things out, but I kind of got the cast of characters this way. I would never have come up with this composition on a big canvas if I did it all at once. So this became such an interesting way for me to work. I never understood the way that we were taught to paint, where you work from the general to the specific. You outline everything and then you put in your tonal washes. I never knew how much detail to add and where, but if I was beholding each object, making it as if I was seeing it and kind of having my eyes scan across the space, it somehow made sense to me. So this was a painting where I started with the still life on the table, and then I used a photograph of our younger daughter in the high chair, and then I had a drawing of myself making a self-portrait, and I used that to put at the very end. I thought, what am I going to put in this empty space? So I put myself in, and I came up with this. I thought it was funny. Painting of a woman ignoring her child because she's making a drawing. And I thought, isn't this so true? People would sometimes look at my paintings and go, "Oh, you're such a good mother. You're painting your children and stuff." And I thought, actually, I can only paint them if I have to take care and I'm not with them. So it's this it's this sort of funny thing about being a mother artist. You are sort of pulled in two directions. So at any rate, I really loved the subject of putting in a mother, but that was the last time I used me. At this point, I started this painting with these objects, which I brought into my studio and painted from direct observation, and then used a photograph of my daughter putting a coin in this elephant bank. And then I needed something on the left, and I found this picture of a woman in a magazine. She was advertising golf clothes, picking up a golf tee, but she was such a good shape that I thought, I'm going to just use her in the painting. So I'm thinking about a figure as a shape as well as, an actor. And I really thought, this is an actress and she's being me. She's the mother, but I had to use somebody else. So it's a painting that's made from photographs, direct observation, and memory, because this was our dining room table, and short-term memory because it's right there, just a few steps away from where I'm painting. So I have a rule about photography, and I'll talk about it, but I think that I don't believe in using one photograph for a painting, because then it will look like a photograph, which actually is fine if you're a painter interested in photographs. So I kind of have a rule, minimum 3 photographs that you place together, and they can be different views of the same scene or different people who never were there together, and you bring them together. And every painting has to have something painted from life, because it's like that painting, that pot gave everything else a kind of believability. So just so you know, these are the kind of things that what they looked like on the wall. They're still very dark and they're very crusty, and I'm using at this point a limited palette. And this is another thing. So when the black paintings was sort of a limited value, now I'm getting more light and shadow, but I only use 3 hues and white. I use a red, a blue, which can be black, and a yellow. And it's sort of a variation on a Venetian palette. And with each painting, I would come up with a different yellow, like maybe cadmium yellow, or maybe it would be yellow ochre. And then the next one, maybe I'd use black or not. And then maybe another painting, I would use ultramarine blue. So it would always be one blue or black, one yellow, and then a red, which could be a cadmium red or it could be alizarin crimson. And so these three different primaries would then mix to create a whole range of purples and greens and oranges and browns. And sometimes if I wasn't using black, the darkest color I could get was like a blue and red purpley thing. So you can't really get real darks, but I kind of like that kind of all over tone. So the great thing about having a limited palette is if I'm working piecemeal, I never had to like come in and think like, how did I mix that gray? Like what was in that red? Because I just don't have that many choices. So it's great for that kind of distracted painter who's leaving and coming back to the studio a lot. But it also, as the paintings got more and more complicated, that limited palette really unites the painting and creates a kind of, I don't know, order, a harmony. It's not about realism. It's not about like really what color things are. I'm really a tonal painter. It's about sort of how much light is hitting them. So I'm working in that way for a few years. And then one day, this thing happened where my daughters were they spilled something and they got out the mops. They're wearing their soccer uniforms. And I got out the Polaroid camera because that's what I had then. And I started taking pictures of the light raking in, which this light only happens in March. And it just looked so like a Caravaggio. There was something about the geometry and the way the light helped to define the space and the way it kind of cut across people. And so I started making paintings off of those photographs and inventing things like the figure on the right I've just invented. So here's a huge painting I made where I used those photographs. I used a mirror for the figure in the front is me. And it's just a house cleaning, painting about house cleaning. I mean, what's the subject? That's all that is. But I started the painting where the hip meets the little girl, like on her knees. And then I kind of just moved out. As you can see, as things get to the edges, they get kind of blurry. Like I really run out of steam. So it has a sort of focus in the middle and then moves out. And this is a painting that's made with black, but I think I might have added blue at the end. So I started another big painting with the little girl with the mop. And then I needed something in the foreground as I'm moving right, out from the center. And I need a big figure. And I saw this photograph in a fashion magazine because I'm always like combing the fashion magazines for good photos. And it was a woman adjusting her sandal. And I had just seen this sculpture in the Boston Museum of Nike adjusting her sandal, which is a conventional pose that goddesses would take in Roman sculpture. They often were used in temple doors to tell people to take off their shoes. That's what these sculptures were about. At any rate, I love the way the fashion photographer was using this historical idea, but using it to sell shoes. So I put her in. I just painted from the photograph, the fashion photograph, but put her in my house. And this was what I come to call an accidental narrative, like the baby and the mother doing the self-portrait. It just became like a Cinderella painting to me. And I sort of really thought that was interesting. I could never make a painting about a fairy tale if you asked me to, but just by this sort of wacky way of working and improvising, and I ended up with, I thought, a Cinderella. It's funny because my daughters now look like this woman who's about to go out and have fun while the others are cleaning the house. So another painting is about, started with the knee in the middle and then kind of moved out. And I thought, I'm going to bring cards into it. I love games of cards. I'm not a great card player, but I love the way, to me, the game of gin rummy is like painting because you have these limited cards, and then whatever you're dealt with, you have to make something work. And I think of that as like a limited palette. It's like, how are you going to make these cards into a winning hand? Or how are you going to make these bizarre colors that you've chosen? This was a strange palette that I used in this one. It has green and a red and a yellow. How are you going to make that mean light and space and air? So I like that metaphor of the cards. And this was a painting of that I had these little photographs of the girls, and then I put them into this world of our downstairs. And it's just about a summer evening where we were about to go outside. So nothing really fabulous with the subject matter except a moment in a moment in the life. And so the mother there is in the kitchen. The father he looks more like my father than my husband, actually, that guy, but he's reading the mail. And I learned a lot about painting sunlight in this, about how you can't make it too bright. It's like if you want it to sit as part of the painting, I sort of have to make it dark, and then it's dark sunlight. Anyway, so then I had to make a mural for Brandeis Women's Center. It ended up being this huge kind of shaped space, but this is a study for it. And I thought, what if I just what am I going to do? I thought I'll just use that composition I had, but I'll replace the man with this woman. And I got, again, from a fashion magazine, this woman in high heels. She's a scholar. This was the Women's Scholar Resource Center. So I love this idea that she would be wearing high heels and writing her dissertation or something. And so this is a point where I start to realize I can substitute things. So one figure I'll take and I'll put in different paintings. And I think fiction writers do that all the time. They have one character that maybe moves in different writing at any rate. So I just thought, oh, that's okay. It's a way to generate paintings. This is a really tall painting, and it started just with the quahog shell, which is how I always started my beginning painting class. Brandeis, they always started painting a quahog shell, which is I don't know if you have them in Seattle. We have, they're Rhode Island big clams that are here on the beach. And then I moved to my daughter's boots, and then the chair. This is in my studio. And then I just turned it into our porch and put my other daughter in, kept moving up until it was this actor being a mom with somebody on the couch. So just kind of making up the story as I go along. And this is one too, I started with the glove and then kind of moved out, a big still life. But I became really interested as I'm looking through magazines of this idea, this trope of women with the coat over their shoulders. It's something that's used a lot so that so the fashion photographers can show the dress as well as the coat that goes over it. And I love the way it was a metaphor to me for somebody who's ambivalent. Like, are they coming or are they going? Like, are they going to just take that coat off, or are they about to put the coat on? And I thought this is so great for the working mom, a character of the working mother. This was a time when there was a lot in the news and stuff about the mommy wars and should women be working and, like leaving the home. And so I like this idea of having this character based on her clothes of being the working mom who's like not really sure if she's coming or going. So at this point too, I start to make little paintings off of the big paintings. So because the paintings are sort of put together in a hodgepodge way, sometimes I just sit back and make a perceptual painting of my own painting. The way you might make a master copy, I just paint my painting. I say, like, what do I have here? And sometimes these little paintings, often they're better than the big paintings. They're just fresher, things come together, and sometimes they then give me a way to go back and finish the big painting. So I still do that. I mean, on the wall of my studio at any time, there's all these little paintings that are done from the big paintings. And when I show them, people are really surprised, like, wait a minute, you didn't do these before the big paintings? No, they're after the big paintings. So I have to compose on the big scale. I think with the big scale, things are almost life size. So, and that makes sense to me. Things seem more real. And then the little paintings are, I just can't compose on the little scale. This is another big painting about a woman who's obsessed with the news. So when I paint, I listen to news. I know it's probably not great, but I listen to NPR all day. Lately, I've been listening to audiobooks, but so this is a woman who's like ignoring her children because she's reading the newspaper. And it started just with the still life in the middle. And then I kind of like, oh, summer day. But I just think that the stories that have been on the news have really just sort of seeped into my subconscious and made me find subject matter. Like, this is a big painting about, this was a time when parents really had to suddenly be aware that they had to monitor the internet. The internet was new and their kids were going all sorts of awful places. So I was thinking about what it's like to be a mother of like children growing up. I just feel like I was like a control freak here, like practice the piano, like watch what you're looking at on the, and so this was this woman looks like olive oil or something, but this was this idea of this mother who was kind of in the center of the household, kind of making all the decisions. And there's my husband, Dennis, who's off just sitting doing nothing, which is so unrealistic because he's in the kitchen all the time. He's the one who cooks. And I should not have sort of shown him as just sitting around doing nothing. I made these figures that were pieced together from different places. So that handbag was from a Kate Spade ad. And then I added my daughter's head at the top and her boots. And these paintings were just about, well, what if I had these nicely dressed people come into our porch and that's some kind of party. And I was thinking, I really started looking at fashion photography. I'm not that into it anymore, but I really loved like Deborah Turbeville, who was known for her like heroin chic. And she was a painter and she got into a lot of trouble for her images that had, I don't know, models that looked too skinny and like they weren't all that healthy. And she goes, why is everyone getting so upset? All I'm trying to do is put 5 figures in a space. And her photographs are very painterly and she composes the figures in such a beautiful way. And I thought, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to put 5 figures in a space. So these are some versions of little ones where that woman with the bag, sometimes she's, I don't know, I feel like she always takes on a different role when I paint her with different people next to them. And this is another one where I use her again in this big painting with the visitors, where she's visiting, and there's our daughter showing off her bunny. So I should say I really care about light and the quality of light, but sizes of things, this is like 8 times the size of our porch. So that's not realistic, but if you look out the windows, that is what our yard kind of looks like out the windows. There's another woman with her coat over her shoulders, another porch painting of the girls holding their pets, this idea of people just coming home and lounging around. Another, just the girls lounging around, started with the tulips and then added them bit by bit. Our 2 sisters, one of them is a homebody. One of them, I painted her like an angel, just, it's like an annunciation. She's always out the door. Nellie's always out the door. Rosa's more the homebody. And another weird still life with figures. This is a painting called Rosa Moves Out. And I thought, what it would be like if I used the wood stove, if I stood behind the wood stove and used it as a repoussoir, something to just be, in front of everything else. And then Rosa had just moved out of her apartment in college, and she moved all of her furniture, that crazy chair and these IKEA things, and into the house. And so it was about Rosa moving out of her apartment, but people seemed to think it was about Rosa leaving home and that it was a very sad painting. It was actually about her kind of coming back. And this is a painting about Nellie with her friends who got together for a meal after their first half a semester at college. And they're all talking about their new lives. And we have our house is 1 room. And so we couldn't escape. So this idea of Dennis and I are sort of hovering around the edges while they're all talking about their new life. And I called it equinox meal, because this is the time of year we're at now, where you've got these bright spots in this world that's getting increasingly purple. So this is a painting that's starting with my daughter holding a phone up to her ear. And then it turned into a painting about, I started adding figures, and it ended up being a painting about the 5 senses. It's a big painting. So she's listening, and then there's touch, there's smell, and then Dennis, who's cooking, is the taste, and then sights, the whole thing. And the view would be as if I was sort of sitting on the counter, like looking down. There's sort of an impossible point of view, but I tried to make it make sense. My favorite part of this painting was painting the dishwasher from above with all the upside down objects. I started this to paint my studio doors as just another. So I never paint the upstairs rooms. I never paint the front of the house. We have goats and they're in the front, never paint them. It's always just the downstairs of our house, that one room with the wood stove, the little kitchen, the dining room table, the screen porch, and then my studio doors, which have this big X. And here is a painting big painting, started on a green ground, and I planned to just cover it all in, but I started to put the figures in the outside, and I realized that green, though very light, started to look like shadow. So it just changed the way I thought about light and shadow. And I realized I didn't have to get dark always to make the silhouetted doors. So I did that again in this painting, where the doors they're just the first wash that's on the canvas, and then the outside gets really thick, and it's about a cookout where whenever Dennis makes a fire, it's always right in front of my studio doors, and the smoke always comes in. But this is about sort of Memorial Day. And here's another one that was about the pandemic, which was like a dream. When the kids came home, Rosa was walking her cat on a leash, and Nellie was carrying her pit bull around like a baby. And it was just such a surreal time, as you know. So that's a painting about that. And here's another studio doors with the two dogs, my daughter's pit bull and our black dog, Piero. And this is a winter painting where we have a fire pit outside, and I got blinds for the windows, and I love the kind of just putting those stripes across the window and what that does. And then this is my maybe the most recent one. No, I've got another more recent one, but in the winter we have to bring all our plants in because they freeze, and so the elephant's ear and the geraniums. And so this painting is called Overwintering, and there's a dress on the big silk dress I painted a million times on the chair. So this is a painting about the dots of light on the porch, and it started with just the leaf and my daughter. And this is a second one I did the same size. And I want you to remember this because this motif I came to again recently, but with a totally different palette. So these are two blue paintings about just the table and the people around the table, like an end of a meal. The dishwasher is probably the best thing in here. Sort of the light moving to the dishwasher. And this is from the dishwasher, same room, but just looking from the dishwasher out to the round table. And another blue painting. And this was a painting of the huge painting that I worked on forever and struggled with it, about looking toward, a view that I hadn't done yet, looking towards these bookcases we have that go up 2 stories in this one open planned interior. And our daughter Rosa is now was at this time studying architecture, and so we took out our house plans, and I had this. She was actually doing a crossword puzzle, one of those big crossword puzzles, but I had this imagination of her like doing a plan. Architects don't work like this anymore, it's all CAD. But this was this idea that she was drawing architecture, and the family is there. And so that's what that painting looked like on the wall. You can see it's really big. And that's the painting of the pandemic with the dreamy people outside. And so then I said, I'm doing another one of that house with Rosa drawing. And I just blew everybody up so that there were less shapes. And variation on that subject. So then a very limited palette, but it started on a blue washy ground, and I kind of kept pieces of those twinkly blues. So as things get much more orangey, those blues are kind of like a twinkly light. And the girls are drawing now, which, Nellie's now studying painting and Rosa is now an architect. So, and this is another pandemic painting where we're just out in the yard, and Stephen Harvey used it for the flyer for my last show and he called it autofiction, which I love because the paintings, they're fictional, but they are based on my own experience. And I never painted just a figure sitting in a chair. It's always, this complicated, this sort of whole scheme of everything that's in front of my eyes. But I took the detail of Nellie in that painting in the middle with the red shirt, and I just blew her up. And so I thought that was a way, it was a way to get me to just paint a simple painting of figure in a chair. Also, Stephen Hardy said something to me that I didn't paint enough figures looking out at us. It was so that there was like this voyeuristic sense that the figures were just sort of doing their, going about their business without being aware of the viewer. So I don't know if that's actually true. I often have a figure looking out, but I liked the way she was meeting our gaze. One of the things I have loved about painting interiors of a house is when we're all in a house, like we're intimate, we're close proximity, but we're often doing totally different things. One person's cooking, one's watching TV, one's reading, but we're next to each other. It's just we're not really relating. And I never really made paintings about a conversation so then I thought, okay, I'm going to make a painting about a dinner table where we're all gathered together, which was for me radical. It's like people are not moving in different directions. They're actually together, and this painting has really a different palette for me where I'm using vermilion, red and green and a brighter color. I kept blue out of it till the very end when I started to paint that splatterware. So it was mainly black, green, red, and yellow. And there's Nellie doing the crossword puzzle. So these are little paintings that I made off of that big one. And then I started a horizontal version to see if I could do it. So I'm always cannibalizing my own paintings because I don't want to get stuck and I don't want to come up with a totally new idea. So I just try to vary, what I've done before. So I had a hard time with that whole space on the left. Anyway, this is the way it ended up. It's sort of the same painting, but with more of the room on the left. And there's another painting. It's Thanksgiving. There's a football game on the TV, but painted from so many different made up figures, photographs. But now when I look at it, I think like, oh yeah, that was us, but it's an invention. It's truly a lie or like fiction, but it's based on truth. And this is a littler one I made from the big one. And I actually like this little one better. That's something about the color I like better. And there's another painting of preparing a meal. And this is the painting that I wanted you to think back to that figure of Nellie in front of the grape arbor. So suddenly I'm just beginning to realize that I can paint light with bright hue, rather than just getting like lighter grays and darker grays. And, it just came to me. It just felt right. It felt natural. And it's like, the big question I ask is it believable? It might not be realistic, but can I believe it? And it's still got the it's my friend Gwen, who came to visit, and polka dot light through the grape arbor. And then I added Nellie out at the edge, and that's Dennis right behind her. And there's that painting in the show. So when I left Brandeis, retired, they gave me a show, which was really nice because they don't do faculty shows, but they put my work with work from the Rose Art Museum, the Brandeis Art Museum. And it was scary. I was a little worried, but there I am between Milton Avery and Fairfield Porter. I mean, they were the two artists that I looked at when I first got out of school. And I realized like, they're my art parents. It makes sense that everything I do comes from them. And so I felt like they sort of supported me. And here, I love this Alex Katz in the collection because the woman, it's Ada, and she just looks like my mother looked, with the overcoat and the pumps. I love how simple it is. And my paintings have gotten so busy, and this is so serene. And I just loved having that painting there next to mine. It kind of it felt like it calmed them down, and it just made them look better, so oddly. So I took some time to just make drawings. I had a show at the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, and I just made big drawings for the show. And I love working in wash. And I don't really, like while I'm painting, I don't really make wash drawings. I kind of have to have a drawing campaign and just draw. And then And then I have my drawing time is over and I just do painting, but I just don't do them at the same time. I love working in wash. I'm not a charcoal person. I just don't like dry medium. I love the wet. So anyway, I took that painting of it started with the flowers on our kitchen counter, and then I ended up, just working like day by day. It came down to the open drawer, which became so interesting. I've seen this drawer, like how many, we've lived in this house for 35 years and I never have painted it. And so I loved painting that drawer. It's a part of my life, and I don't know. So yeah. So anyway, that's that. We're almost done here. It's another drawing I did of a studio visit. And this is another visit of my nephew's little girls came to visit around Christmas last year. And I wanted to create a painting with them in it. That's their mothers to the right, Tara, and then our daughters are there. And again, it's piecemealed from a million different sources, and it's really weird color. It's a very red painting. And it's this time of year at Christmas when the light goes all the way in and hits the back wall. And it's the only thing I like about winter here is the raking light. It's just so beautiful. So I think my goal in these paintings, I actually added perspectival lines, is to create a painting that is both flat and perspectively deep at the same time. I mean, that is what I really hope to do, to not just have it be a deep perspectival box or just flat shape. So I really like that tension. And these are two little studies. So I make the studies, by the way, I didn't mention this, usually in acrylic gouache, which is a kind of matte acrylic paint that I really love to use. And this is a painting I'm working on now. So that's one of the big drawings. And so I decided to make a 2-panel painting. So it's like 100 inches, 110 inches wide. I started with the plant on the right, and then I just started moving over and added this figure with the hose. And I've been working on garden paintings. So everything's getting very bright this summer, very pink. So this is the painting in the studio. It's not finished yet, but I thought I would just show you what I'm working on. Okay, so that's it.
Oh, what a feast for the eyes. My goodness. So much great stuff to look at and to hear about.
Thank you.
Yes.
I hope I went on too long. I'm sorry.
You're fine. Okay. I thought that the place to start was one of these. Oh, you work, this is one of Jennifer's questions. You work with a lot of scale relationships in your paintings, but there's perspectival structure too, as we just saw. What are some recommendations you have for beginning painters to push the space in a painting?
Well, perspective is very controversial, and there are a lot of people who say, like, don't use perspective, it doesn't make sense. But I think if you are working out from a form, like as if you're painting an apple on a table, if you're just really aware with as much specificity as you paint the apple of what's going on either side of the apple, below it, above it, and you just let your brush stroke really express what's far away but next to the apple, so that you're compacting space when you paint. You're painting across. It's called passage painting. You paint across the canvas, but you're representing things that might be far away as well as close up. And I think it's just, don't always put things against a blank wall. Like, really allow yourself to paint a thing against a complicated space and then really deal with what's far away. And you'll end up with really crazy, things coming together, like in photographs. If you ever look at a photograph, take a photograph of, a friend, and then you realize, like, right next to their head is like somebody else that's like right there, or a car, and it's like, if you just slow down and be purely visual, you can get those kinds of crazy scale relationships in your painting. It means not painting things with names. It means just being visual and scanning.
I love that. I talk to my students a lot about, hey, don't tell yourself what it is that you're actually drawing. Just draw what you see.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Another question from Jennifer is, how many hours do your larger scale paintings usually take? And is there anything you discovered to help you speed things up?
I'm a really fast painter, and what I need to do is slow down, because if I'm fast, I'm sloppy and things are not as interesting. So I think working big helped me slow things down. And it's just slow and steady. I mean, the big paintings get filled up, within it depends how often you get in the studio, a couple of months or something. But then I start to doubt things, take things out, move them around. So, and I've had to give paintings a rest and come back to them. So sometimes it's a year or even longer.
Lovely. Julie Allen asks, I'm curious about how some of the figures in the paintings bump their heads up against the top of the frame, or their bodies are going outside the frame to the side. Could you speak about this choice? Because it happens a lot, right?
Yeah. So sometimes it's accidental because but I think I choose. I come up to the edge and I think, well, I'll bring a figure in from the edge. I guess it suggests that the world goes on past the frame of the canvas, the viewfinder of the canvas. And again, it flattens space. If things are bumped up against the edge, if you get shapes that come in off the edge, you get more of a graphic kind of tension between deep and flat. So yeah, it's probably why I do it. It's to flattens things out.
Jennifer also asks, do you ever use a mirror to see the big painting differently in reverse when you create the little painting?
Oh my gosh, yes. I am addicted to my mirror. In fact, I use it so much, sometimes I forget which way my painting actually goes because I've looked at it more in the mirror. I love the mirror. And I love turning paintings upside down, but when they're really big, that's hard to do. But I've sometimes made the best moves when the painting is turned upside down, because then I see things just as color and shape. And then when I turn it back, it's like those color shapes, they mean that figure more than when I was just painting it right side up and thinking about it as a figure. So yes, mirror is the best.
Daphne asks, the points of view are interesting. Some feel like an aerial view from above. Can you talk about how you would decide on the viewpoints in the painting?
Yeah,
Yeah.
my earlier paintings were really from above when I was sort of inventing. And then somebody told a painter I really love is Edwin Dickinson. If you know his paintings, many of you should look him up. He was really influenced by film. He was a 20th century painter. And so a lot of his paintings have a downward look because there was this camera angles in the black and white films that he was looking at in the early 20th century. And looking down flattens things out, like in Japanese woodcuts. The camera kind of messed things up for me for a while, because when I was taking a photo, like those Polaroids, suddenly the eye level, is in the middle of the space. So then I'm not looking down anymore. But recently I've tried to flip things up again, just to flatten them out. And so, yeah, look down.
Wonderful. Jennifer asks, what do you mix with the marble dust?
Wax. You can't put too much marble dust in, so you need something to make it wet. And now actually I still use marble dust. I am addicted to marble dust, but I also use a medium called Marge's medium, which Fairfield Porter used, but it's really controversial and I don't want to recommend it because some people say, conservatives say it's terrible, but I've been using it for 25 years and it's nothing bad has happened. So you mix a little black oil. It's lead infused oil with a mastic varnish. And when you mix it up, you get a gel. After about a minute, the thing turns into a gel. And if I mix it into the paint, it makes the paint really fluffy and waxy. But I then add marble dust to it. So it's still really important that I get the paint to feel a certain way. I think everyone has their own sense of touch. And the mediums that my teachers gave me, I hated them. And I think it's important that everyone find their own medium. Some people like thin paint, some people like, thick, some people like oily, some people like dry. And it's an important part finding your own touch with the paint, that you find your own mediums. It's really fun to use different recipes and experiment. But marble dust, yeah, really still use it.
It's so interesting how these paintings are actually like made like a collage, which is sort of how I work. And so I'm just really amazed to see something that seems so put together come about in such a way as to be sort of pieced together in that same way. So
yeah, collage is having a moment with painters. I mean, so many painters use collage to kind of set up their paintings, and because it's all about the surface and the shape, but then you can still get illusion, but you get that tension between the surface and the depth, which is it's just so essential to what painting is. So yeah, I think I like that comparison to collage. Thanks.
yeah, and there's also that abstraction versus reality that kind of comes in and out, and all of us do it in a completely different way. Just talking to Daphne about this in different things, and I think of myself as an abstract um, artist, but everything looks realistic, so it's just like these things that you think one way and it kind of just works a different way.
That quote of Fairfield Porter's, do you know that quote about him, what he said about abstract and figurative painting? So he said that, oh my God, I can't quote it well enough, but he said that for abstract painters, the important thing is, what are they painting? Like what is really their subject? And for figurative painters, it's the form and it's the abstraction. And so they're both kind of moving the other. He said it much more eloquently, but it's
yeah, wonderful. Well, I thank you for your time with us. Does anybody have any last minute questions or thoughts?
Yes, please do copy the
Yeah,
chat for me.
absolutely. There's a lot of great little bits in there. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. And I hope our paths cross again soon. And thank you, Daphne. Okay, bye-bye.